Good afternoon. Welcome to the informational meeting of Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. As we always do, we start out with committee reports. The UDC, would anybody like to report on the UDC meeting?
I thought we had a great meeting, kind of went through the various items on the agenda, talked about the important concerns of that committee. It was very collegial and cooperative. I thought it was a successful meeting.
Thank you. This time we'll go to council remarks. Council remarks. Seeing none, we'll jump right into the always exciting monthly financial statements. Sean Pritchard.
Good afternoon, Sean Pritchett, Director of Finance. Here to present the June monthly financial report. I am going to go through fairly quickly through the financials given limited time. I believe we have another presentation here yet today as well. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the entertainment tax fund and focus on that for a little bit for a couple of reasons. First, we'll be going into budgeting here over the course of the next several months, and so I just thought that'd be a great opportunity to kind of dive into that as well as the presentation today from the Washington Pavilion. And we also have each of our management contracts that are funded by the entertainment tax, which will be up for renewal this year or later this year. So it's a good opportunity to kind of discuss how the entertainment tax works and how we work with our third parties in terms of the operation and management of our entertainment venues. So with that, what you'll see in the monthly financials and even in the local economic indicators is very similar to what we've seen in the past. Much the same trends that we've seen previously. Certainly it's positive. We've seen employment up about 3.9% over this time last year, which is positive, and labor force is up about 3% since May of 2021. As far as unemployment, we're still hovering at a more than a 5-year low. We're about 1.9%, which was exactly where we were last month at this time, just slightly below the state average. And of course, nationally, we're hovering at about 3.4%. So overall, both local, regionally, and nationally, we are still staying very low. Unfortunately, we saw another uptick in the inflation after a couple of months of slight reductions. It came in at 9.8 or 9.1% for the month of June, which is the largest 12-month increase we've seen since November of 1981. So certainly living through some unprecedented times, at least in terms of what most of us have gone through. Certainly the Federal Reserve has been escalating rates and are expected to do so again at the end of this month as they attempt to kind of put to mitigate some of the impacts of what's happening out there in the marketplace. Again, it's still being driven in large part by energy prices. You can see in June that was up 41.6%. Again, this is the largest increase since the year 1980. Food cost inflation was also high at 10.4%, and then if you just remove that for all general goods, inflation is still 5.9%, so still a fairly significant increase, but certainly not to the extent that we've seen with those energy prices and the impact that that is having. Building permits continue to be robust for the city of Sioux Falls, and through June we had $868.5 million in building permit valuations. That's a 76% increase over where we were at this time last year, driven in large part by new commercial development. Firstly, primarily by office, institutional, and educational sectors, which were up $146 million. Strip malls, hotels, and restaurants, which are considered other commercial, up $141 million. Again, those are two areas that were down significantly during the pandemic, but have come roaring back in the present year. And then, of course, multifamily continues to add a significant amount of value as well. That is up $112 million compared to the very strong year we had last year at this time. And you can certainly see that in terms of the units that are being permitted. Right now, we have 1,830 multifamily units permitted through this time of the year, through June. That compares, that's up from 1,031 units the previous year at this time. On single family housing, you are seeing that come down a little bit. We are above where we were in 19 and 20, but we're about 41 units behind where we were this time last year. Townhomes up slightly, about 14 more units. Overall, 2,533 residential units have been permitted through June of this year. Sales tax collections, you can see if you compare June of 2022 with June of 2021, we were up 12.4%. you start netting out some impacts of inflation at that 8.5% to 9%, you're still left with really about a 3.5% growth in terms of that, and that's pretty solid compared to kind of our historical norms, where we've been in that overall 4 to 5% even with inflation. So it's a pretty solid month overall. You're going to continue to see that rolling 12-month average come down over time as we kind of work our way through those rebound that we had during 2021. But overall, we are still up through this time of the year, through June. First 6 months of the year, we're up almost 14%, 13.7 actually. On the entertainment tax side, which is slightly more volatile, still pretty strong there as well. We were up 12% in June over June of 2021. And overall, year to date, that I had written this number down, but don't have it, but it's in your financials there, still fairly strong coming into the course of this year through those first 6 months. A couple of things as you look at this on an industry basis. So these are the June numbers that translate back to May transactions. And a couple of things you'll notice there that just kind of jump out at you. One, remote retailer sales were down 10%. This is the first time since tracking this we actually saw this to go down. So you're kind of seeing, at least in my estimation, maybe some softness occurring on the consumer side. Even if you look at eating establishments, 7%, you look at department stores, 9%, grocery stores, 5%. Staying almost with inflation, maybe even slightly ahead of inflation, but not significantly. What's carrying us forward in terms of the June numbers, the manufacturing numbers were up 53%. Wholesale trade has been very strong. Again, that's up 48%. Agriculture, which is not shown up on here, also came in strong over the last couple of months. So I think in terms of some of those business transaction side of things, that's kind of what's carried some of our sales taxes here over the last couple of months and some of the growth that we've seen. Lodging taxes continue to be doing very well. Overall, 28% up in June over June of last year. Overall, for the year, they're up almost 35%. So again, this is being driven in large part by higher rates, solid occupancy, but driven in large part because the rates are up across the board. And then as far as the bid, which is not as much driven by rates, driven more by occupancy, you can see we're up 7.3% in June of 2022 versus June of 21. More recent numbers for July continue to still show some strong performance overall for the lodging. Maybe not quite as robust as maybe we'd seen in the month of June, but we'll kind of continue to track that as we get into the months ahead. Overall, in terms of revenues for the city, we are 55% collected through this time of year, compared to 54% of anticipated revenues for the general fund for last year. Much in line with our expectations, a little ahead, primarily driven by that growth of the sales tax exceeding budget projections here up to date. And then as you can see on the expenditure side, there's no real surprises here either. We're 40% expended through the month of June. That compares to 39% through the month of June last year. But of course, we had some major transfers to the internal service funds that we typically had been doing in July, and those were moved up to March of this year. So you'll see that even out a little bit here in the months ahead. With that, I'm going to jump into a little bit of a discussion in regard to our entertainment tax fund. And give you a little bit of a background on that, particularly for those that are new to the council, give you an opportunity to ask some questions as we kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive here. I will say that in your financial report, you'll see a section that's devoted to the entertainment tax fund that kind of gives a snapshot of what that fund balance looks like and how it's performing, as well as it, like all of our capital projects, anything that's considered a capital project is also listed in what the status of that project is as it relates to our entertainment tax venues. So the entertainment tax fund, just to give you a little bit background, we began collecting this back in 1992, and it's used to fund construction of the Washington Pavilion at that time, as well as the convention center at the time it was implemented. So right now, as a city, we use it primarily for construction and capital improvements for our events venues, which I'll list here in a moment, for maintenance repair expenses, and then to a certain extent for operating expenses as well for each of those venues. This is allowed by state law, the imposition of this tax, and we'll talk on the next slide what it's imposed on, but it's 10-52A-2, and it's essentially allowed for use of land acquisition, architectural fees, construction, and operations for civic centers, auditoriums, athletic buildings, and as well as, and this is broadly defined as promotion and advertising of the city, its facilities, attractions, and activities. And our ordinance that was implemented, that implemented this tax for the city of Sioux Falls, follows much of that same language. It varies just slightly, but it primarily follows the state language overall. It is that third penny tax that is charged, and it's charged on lodging accommodations, alcohol sales, dining services, restaurants, and then as well as ticketed events. And to give you a snapshot of what the base of this tax is, over 50% of this comes from restaurants. So as restaurants go, in much respect, that's what really drives the entertainment tax fund. The second highest portion of this is 12% of it comes from lodging, and those are based on our 2022 numbers year to date. And then following that, food stores, drinking establishments, other amusements, and liquor stores, overall, they add about another 23% between those four categories. So that primarily is what's driving that tax, but again, restaurants is really a big piece of that, followed by the lodging. The other part of our entertainment tax fund is that we also incorporate the revenues or the net assets generated by the events complex. So the way our management agreement is structured with ASM Global, who is our manager of that complex, is that they have accounts that they use for generating the revenues and paying the expenses that are related to the events complex. And that includes the baseball stadium, it includes the convention center, the arena, and the T. Denny Sanford Premier Center. And so they manage those accounts, but they do it in custody of the city, acting as an agent of the city. So if we did change management, the managers for those facilities, the city would take custody of those accounts. Because in large part those accounts are technically owned by the city, we don't book the revenues and the expenses on the city's financial statements, but we do book the change in net assets. So you might recall during COVID, we had to make a special appropriation of about $2.5 million because of the losses we were incurring because we were closed. We'd never had to do that before because they'd always been profitable. They had the cash to cover the losses that occurred as a result of the loss because they had built up about $5 million in cash during their first 5 years of operations. They'd been profitable throughout that time, but obviously because of closure and with the existing expenses for utilities and maintenance and all of that, they had incurred that. But typically, we are not appropriating for anything out there because they're typically running in the black there. If you kind of look historically at the entertainment tax, you'll notice, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it is more volatile. So you'll see some significant kind of upswings and downswings because it really is discretionary spending that is being taxed in this. And it's oftentimes the first thing that entertainment is the things that people will cut back on, whether it's restaurants or going out to bars or taking in entertainment type options. And so it is more volatile. You'll see, obviously during the COVID year 2020, there was the most significant reduction we'd seen since we implemented the entertainment tax. But the other one you'll notice is 2009, coming out of the housing recession that we went through at that time in 2008. You saw a little bit of a decrease there as well. Obviously in 21, you see it come roaring back and kind of making up for some of those losses that we occurred in 2020. And so far in 2022, it's been a positive year. Right now, if you look over the 10-year period, it's about a 5% growth rate is where we've been trending in terms of the entertainment tax overall. You can see that kind of consistent growth here over time since 2002 to date. And again, with that 2020 really seeing the only year that you've really seen kind of a give back in terms of the revenues there. We generated $9.4 million in 2021. Right now, we're at $5 million through June of 2022, so we expect we'll hit closer to $10 million for 2022, and we'll be budgeting a 4% increase for 2023 in the budget that comes in front of you, coming in at probably around $10.7 million. So that gives you kind of an idea of what this tax tends to generate. And the nice thing about it is it's dedicated for specific purposes. It ensures that we continue to maintain first-class facilities, and we're reinvesting all the time in those facilities. Those venues that are utilizing the entertainment tax currently are, as I mentioned before, the events complex, and then as well as the Washington Pavilion and the Orpheum Theater. So we have a number of management agents that we work through with that. ASM Global is our primary manager for the events complex, and then we also have a food concessionaire, which is Spectra, who handles all the food for the convention center as well as all the facilities in the Premier Center. And then we also work with the Washington Pavilion. as it relates to both the pavilion and then more recently over, I believe it's been, what, 3 years now that you've been managing the Orpheum, and been doing a great job with that. And I know Darren's going to talk a little bit about that and some of the good things that are happening there, so I'll let him have that discussion. As far as what the city is responsible for, we pay for all of the major repairs and maintenance at all of these facilities from the entertainment tax fund, and then any capital improvements. So we are really looking in the years ahead in terms of trying to figure out what the replacement of some of these higher cost capital improvements are going to be, and making sure that we're getting them incorporated into those projections and that we're saving up over time if we have some of those more significant investments. For example, the Parapit project that will be occurring at the Washington Pavilion starting probably later this year or early next year, and is in the process of being bid, is one of those more significant capital improvement projects that we are currently undertaking. In terms of our future focus, you know, it's really important for us to have well-maintained facilities, having dedicated funding, and a good plan for investing in these facilities regularly over time. We want to make sure that we continue to provide first-class facilities because it's important for attracting visitors, for attracting talent to want to perform in our community, as well as providing a great experience for our residents and our community overall. When we get into the budget, we'll talk more about the entertainment tax model, but we model it out. Right now, we're modeling out all the way to 2039 in terms of expectations, and really more focused on those next 10 years. Some of the more significant expenses we might have would be replacement of the ribbon boards at the Premier Center and some of that, because that technology changes quickly over time, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to reinvest in that experience. We have a very close working relationship with our partners. We have great managers. As I said before, you will be seeing a renewals for those agreements coming forward here over the course of the next several months. We typically have 5-year agreements with each of these entities. And so we'll be talking about that in more detail as we probably get into September, October, once we get beyond those budget months here that we'll be dedicating our focus to here throughout August. Lastly, mention that the contract administrator for this is the Department of Finance, so it's maybe a unique place to have your entertainment venues administered through the Finance Department, because we're not always known for our creativity, but we are known for making sure things are funded and planned out correctly. So we have a great relationship with each of our entities, one of which is going to be speaking to you here next. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the entertainment tax, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding the June financials or the entertainment tax fund.
Thank you. Council Barranco.
I wanted to go back, just thank you for the great presentation. For year-to-date sales tax, thanks, and revenue, I was wanted to get a better understanding. So we're substantially ahead of the forecast, the expectations, or slightly ahead? Because you said once it's corrected for inflation. Could you explain that to me a little bit more?
Well, I mean, we estimate a number based on where we were the previous year. So I think we probably projected a 4% increase based on an increase we expected for the last year. Right. Now, when we go into budgeting for next year, we will reset our expectation for 22, and then we will look at what our expectation will be for 23 based on that. So we'll be talking about that during it. But at this point, yes, we are running ahead of our expectations in regard to sales taxes. But we have to counter that with the fact that we are going to be impacted by inflation. We're already seeing that to a certain extent, so you're giving it back on the expense side too.
Yeah, that really is the reason that I was asking, since I understand there's no way to avoid the fact that we're gonna have to pay for the inflation on the expense side. Then I wanted to make sure that we were running a tick above expectations on the revenue side. Make sure I understood that correctly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilors? Councilor McCarris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions, minor kind of detailed questions. One is, I know that coming before us is going to be a question regarding raising of the permit and licensing, specifically on like home permitting fees. I think we had Butch before us a couple of weeks ago. I was wondering if you could provide us a breakdown on its permitting and fees. How much of our permitting and fees comes from do-it-yourselfers Sean shows up and pulls a permit versus general contractor. So sometime at your convenience, I'd just be interested in knowing if
Okay.
we are looking at raising fees. I just want to know the impact that it has on the general homeowner versus the general contractor. So just a request there.
Sure. I think we can try to see if we can figure out the difference, if we can track the difference between the two, if there's a way to pull that in our system.
That'd be great. And then the second one is a similar question, just as we head into budget, is around the ARPA dollars. And trying to understand, there's a long list on here, and I don't know if there's an easy way to kind of pull for us saying, hey, here's where we're at on those and the expectation of when they might be encumbered or expensed. And as we're looking at the budget for next year, if we could just have some sort of idea of where we're at on those different things without diving into tons of detail on each one.
Yes. In fact, the summary kind of, I think, tries to show what is encumbered. We are starting to see, so the ones where we've done the sub-grant recipient agreements, we are starting to get billed for those, so that's good. We're starting to see that money go out the door based on the impacts that it's had. So it took a while to get those agreements in place. You're going to see more significant amounts of those funds getting obligated as this year progresses this year. Primarily because a large chunk of that is, one, the wastewater treatment facility. So that's, I can't remember how many million, if it's $4 or $5 million off the top of my head. We have quite a $5 or $6 or $7 million in the River Greenway project. So when that bids and is awarded, that will get encumbered, likely, I believe, this year. And then the other Parapit project, that one will have a significant investment. That's going to be a couple of $1 million as well. So that will get encumbered. That'll be a big chunk of it. And then there'll just be a lot of smaller ones, which are these sub-grants. Many of those are now encumbered and slowly starting to go out the door as well. But yes, I mean, I'm happy to kind of give you an update in future financial reports too as we start to. But the three big ones will be making sure that we obligate, and we want that to be the first, hopefully, money out the door, but we're still working with the state because there's RLF and they have ARPA dollars in it, figuring out how they want us to do that, whether we need to do it over time or if they'll allow us to be on the front end of that, and then the other two projects be more significant. So,
Sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions? I've just got one on the entertainment tax, since you talked about a little bit better explanation for those of us, is you talked about on page 4, it talks about the restricted $3.7 million. And so the fund balance as of January 1st, and the current budget is 15.2, less restricted. Could you explain for us just a little bit more about the restricted funds and down to the available fund balance?
I believe the restricted portion is the portion that has to deal with the net assets at the event center. So because it's not something that we have direct access to, we restrict it because it's restricted for the purposes of operating the event centers. That more than likely is their net asset value. Correct? Yes. I answered that right.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for an always exciting financial report. We all look forward to that. I know I've got several texts from counselors saying they're looking forward to the best presentation. Now we'll move on to the Washington Pavilion Orpheum Theater. Darren Smith, you've got a high bar, Darren, to outdo that.
Well, good afternoon. Darren Smith, Washington Pavilion Management Company. Thank you for having me here today, and congratulations once again to the new council members. Thank you for serving. Chairman Stale, what would you like me to do with these presentations for the handouts for the council members? I think they're pretty good. Well, July is the beginning of a new fiscal year for us, so it really is a perfect time to do a look back over the past 12 months and a look ahead to the next 12 months. Sean made it clear to me I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to get moving through here and get that done. Jump right in. Looking back over the last 12 months, the first really statement that comes to mind for me is we've emerged from COVID even stronger and better. So we've spent the past 12 months really rehiring and rebuilding much of our team. Not sure this was something that was well known or widespread, but a short time after COVID hit, and the initial PPP funds that we utilized, we did have a significant reduction in our budget and in our staffing, about 25% on the staffing side and about 45% on what was a $10 million plus budget for that year that was summer of 2020 to 2021. So we've really spent the last year rebuilding and rehiring that team, and we've got the best team we've ever had by far. So that's been great to see. A return to pre-COVID numbers over the past 12 months. I think most people I talk to, regardless of what they do for a living, what business or organization they're a part of, everybody seems to be comparing pre-COVID to where they are today, which is a natural thing to do. And so I'll talk about this a little bit in the coming slides, but happy to report that we are back to pre-COVID levels or exceeding pre-COVID levels virtually across the board. And for us, pre-COVID in 2019, those were record numbers for us. Again, in the museums, in the theaters, our education program. So we were doing very well, and we're back to that level. Also, the highest level of community support really in the history of our organization going back to 1999 is what we experienced over this past year. We had more than $1.5 million in individual donations, contributions, and corporate sponsorships. That's the highest number we've ever had, so that was great to see. And also, just in recent months, we received the largest single gift from an individual we've ever received. And so we have a press conference a week from today to announce some of those details, and we're excited to do that and what it's going to do for the Washington Pavilion of Arts and Science in particular. Okay, now touching on some of those program areas in particular, again, new all-time attendance record in the museums. So the museums for us are the Science Center and the Visual Arts Center. Those constitute the museums as a whole for us. So when we say museums, those are the areas we're talking about. We had well over 115,000 visitors come through over the past 12 months. Again, that's the highest number we had, and it broke the previous record, which was 2019, right before COVID. We had more than 12,000 local residents and tourists enjoy our free First Fridays. I think most of you, maybe all of you, know that the first Friday of every month at the Washington Pavilion, we open it up, special evening hours, 5 to 8 p.m. Anybody in the community, anybody outside the community can come in and enjoy the Washington Pavilion completely free of charge. This is one of the highest numbers we've ever had for free First Fridays over the course of a year. The education programs just continue to expand with a growing community. We did well over 100 camps, classes, and workshops for kids and adults, mostly kids, but we do some adult stuff as well. Our preschool this past year is back to 100% full with a waiting list. So that, experienced quite a hit during that COVID period. So happy to see that we're back there. And then we had 225 school field trips at the Washington Pavilion over this last year, which is one of the highest numbers we've ever had. And that was nearly 15,000 students from all those different schools that came through. On the live theater side, just say live theater remains very popular and growing. We had the second highest number of Broadway series subscribers in our history this past season, which just wrapped up last month. Second highest number ever. We had 8,000 audience members attend 6 different youth theater productions, and more than 2,000 audience members enjoy 12 summer camp performances. I just want to touch on that youth theater for a moment. Of all the things that we're doing at the Pavilion and at the Orpheum, I would single out the youth theater program as the one in my now 6+ years there that has grown the most percentage-wise. So that's really cool to see, and it bodes very well for our future because these are the future subscribers and ticket holders and performers. So that's been really great to see, and that's gonna continue with our continued investment as well. So as you can see, we're gonna move on now and look at the coming 12 months, some of the exciting things we have planned. But again, as you can see, we are back to those pre-COVID levels. All the areas are doing very, very well. And so now we get a chance to look ahead. So I want to start with live theater and saying that it will be the biggest year yet this coming season. So we've been on sale for about 3 or 4 months with the coming season, which will start in October. We have already surpassed the total number of Broadway season subscriptions that we had this past season. And we'll still be on sale for several months to go with those. Again, we've already exceeded this past season, and this past season was our second highest level ever. We are, as of this morning, we were less than 50 subscriptions sold away from what will be our all-time high record. So again, this upcoming season is going to be great. 4 live theater productions in what we call our Affordable Family Series. This is the most number of productions that we've ever had. It's a wide variety, and the big one will be Disney's Winnie the Pooh, which is still popular. So we're excited to that. And again, that's our Affordable Family Series and kind of ties in with a little bit of that theme with Free First Fridays and some of the other things that we do as a give back for the community. On the Visual Arts Center side, we have a traveling exhibit, what we call a Blockbuster National Traveling Exhibit coming this fall, the Guild Hall, an adventure in the arts. So there's some big name artists with this, Warhol, Pollock and others. A lot of people are excited about this. It's the first national traveling exhibit we've had in 5 years. So again, we're excited about that. And then just a footnote here, the South Dakota Art Educators Conference actually changed locations for their conference from Rapid City to Sioux Falls recently when they learned that we were going to be having this here in Sioux Falls from October through March. Then briefly on the Science Center side, just wanted to mention one of the big projects we know we'll have there in the coming year is a new water playroom in the Kirby Science Discovery Center. It'll be opening in early 2023. It's probably been a while since you guys have been in a water playroom, but this is very popular with pre-K and early elementary school, school-age kids. And this area in the 3 levels of the Science Center, the water playroom is literally the only space in the last 6 years that we did not completely remodel or make over. So this is a private donor-funded project. It's a several $100,000 project. And so again, very excited to be able to do this and complete the Science Center in some ways, those improvements. Some more exciting changes and new services that we plan to offer in the coming year. I want to make you folks aware that Leonardo's Cafe is currently undergoing a significant makeover, and it will get a new name as well. So in the not too distant future, you'll be hearing more about this. And if you come over and have lunch once in a while, you will start to see these improvements. So it'll happen in phases, but it's a completely different model. You'll see expanded hours. I would admit that a moment ago I mentioned virtually all of our areas are back to pre-COVID levels. That is absolutely true with the exception of Leonardo's Cafe. There are a lot of restaurants that are struggling in the community that were hit pretty hard by COVID, labor issues, and some just didn't recover. And Leonardo's has recovered, but not to the level we were at. And so we really wanted to take a hard look at that and bring some folks in who specialize in food and beverage services and in institutions like ours, facilities like ours. And we determined we need to go in a very different direction with that. So we're excited about that. It's a cafe that's almost catered more to the downtown business crowd over the years. It's evolved that way, I think more out of necessity, to be honest with you, than truly being an amenity for those 100 and some thousand families, young families in particular, that come to the Science Center, the Visual Arts Center, go to the shows. So the new model will reflect really being an amenity and catering to those families and others who are coming to the museums and to theater. We are launching a new art consulting service this coming year. So again, this is our attempt to support Sioux Falls moving in the direction of becoming truly a hub of activity when it comes to the arts and culture in the Midwest. We think we can help support this by consulting with businesses and individuals, helping them with the artwork they want to select for their offices and in their homes. And we have some great expertise in this area, so we're excited about the opportunity there. And just the expanded footprint in general in the community and region with how we're supporting the arts and other nonprofit organizations. So I just wanted to touch on that. I think all of you are aware that we're providing management services now for Sculpture Walk and handling virtually all of the administrative duties for them. Doing the same with the municipal band. a number of different community theater organizations. It's not just the Premier Playhouse and the formerly known as Sioux Empire Community Theater. There's more than that. Lights Up Production is a great faith-based community theater program, organization really in town. Goodnight Theater Collective is a small startup in recent years, so we're working with all of them. There's a number of dance companies. Universities is really the big thing we've been into in recent years, more partnerships with them, and you're going to see a lot more of that in the future, so that's very exciting. Okay, I want to wrap up a couple slides on the one on the Orpheum, one on the Pavilion, highlighting what's going on at the Orpheum. Again, I think many of you are aware that once upon a time, 20 years ago, I served on the city council. A few years after that, I worked for the city and the administration side. And I'm not sure I would have ever believed if somebody told me 10 or 20 years ago that we could say the Orpheum is full day and night. But I'm happy to report that is absolutely the case. If somebody wanted to have an event of any kind at the Orpheum in the next 12 months, we would be hard pressed to find an available day or evening. We're probably 90 to 95% full already. And so again, it's full during the day with nonprofit organizations leasing space. Every square foot has been leased. Downtown Sioux Falls is the latest organization to open an office space there. Sioux Falls Arts Council has a small office space, some of the community theater groups also. And then of course, the evenings and weekends, those community theater groups, the dance companies, third-party promoter events, our own events, comedians off-Broadway, corporate events, weddings, just a number of things going on there. And I think it's just going to get better. Last slide here on the Pavilion, and a little bit of a budget angle because I know it is going to be the budget season very soon for you guys. You'll be doing the hearings next month and we'll be back for that. But I want to mention a couple things that you'll see when you get those budget books and start to dive in. So for the Pavilion now, Washington Pavilion of Arts and Science, I'm talking about, there will be no operating contract funding increase for the third consecutive year in 2023. This will be the fourth year in the last 7 that there was no increase. Since 2016, the average annual increases have averaged less than 1% a year. So I say that because if you skip down to that last bullet point, with the city continuing to invest in its facilities and the equipment, that makes our jobs easier. We can't be successful without great facilities and good equipment. And so the less the dollars are going on the operating side with some of those things in the second bullet point, the more that can be redistributed and reinvested in again, the city's assets, the facilities and equipment. So that's really our goal. I want to remind everybody that the city operating contract funding dollars specifically go primarily, almost exclusively, to facility-related expenses. Things like utilities, we pay the electricity, natural gas, water, and sewer bills. Some of those dollars, many of them really go back to the city, but to different departments. It's city electricity that powers our facilities downtown here, city water and sewer and so forth. It pays for facilities maintenance staff. They're taking care of the heating and air conditioning units. They don't look like ours at home. When you're in a historic building, they're a little more challenging and complicated. They break down more often. So we have to have a staff that is skilled to take care of those. These dollars help pay for the custodial staff to take care of the facilities, again, keep them clean, the supplies and materials and so forth. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. Lastly, I want to thank the city team. Don't get an opportunity to do this enough. I want to start really at the highest levels with Mayor Tenhaken and the City Council. You folks are establishing the vision and direction and providing the resources. Again, going back to something I said earlier, to help Sioux Falls achieve becoming truly a hub of activity for the arts and culture in the upper Midwest. And I think we are becoming that. And that's huge for quality of life, for population growth, for recruiting great employees and retaining them. It's very, very important. I want to take it a step further and thank the finance team. As Sean mentioned, we do work directly with them. They're our liaison to city government. So Sean Pritchett, Tom Huber, and Scott Rust, these guys are great to work with. They're really, really good at what they do. I'm not saying that because they say yes to everything we ask for, because they don't. But As someone, again, who's worn a city hat, a couple different city hats at different times before, what I really appreciate about working with these guys is they are great stewards of taxpayer dollars and always trying to make decisions that are in the best interests of our residents and taxpayers and the city as a whole. So we appreciate working with them and everyone at the city. With that, I would entertain any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Counselor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Darren, for the presentation, and always appreciate the job you do. How many years have you been on the job there now? I think you maybe
Just over 6 years.
Wow, time flies, right?
It does, yeah.
So record for subscriptions, what is that number, and what do you anticipate that coming in at?
Yeah, so the highest number of season subscriptions we've ever had to the Broadway series is 3,091. We are at, I think, 3,047 as of this morning, so we're closing in on that number. We had 2,950 this past season. Our goal this year is 3,200, and I think we're going to end up somewhere between 3,200 and 3,300 would be my best guess.
Wow, that's impressive. Congratulations. Tell me about, so Leonardo's, I mean, obviously we all know food and beverage is a pretty tough business, especially nowadays. How has that been doing the last couple of years? I mean, is it kind of maybe a break even, and what do you hope to accomplish by the new name and all this stuff that's coming?
Yep, you know, when we started engaging with people in the industry recently, which we hadn't done a lot in the past because it was, Leonardo's always did okay. It's one of those areas, I think every business has them, they do okay, so you don't pay a lot of attention to them, and then they hit rock bottom somewhere along the line, and you look under the hood and start realizing all the things that could be better. So that really happened for us, I feel, earlier this calendar year. And so in talking to industry experts, the very first question they would always have is, are you profitable? Are your food and beverage services, is your food and beverage area profitable? And I would share with them, yes, we've never not been profitable. It's never been a huge, it's not a cash cow, but it's never been not profitable. And every single time they would stop me and say, congratulations, because a lot of food and beverage services or programs in facilities like ours are not profitable. They typically are seen as an amenity or a loss leader even. And so we've never been at that point. And so that changed our perspective, I think made us feel better about things. But the reality is setting the dollars aside, because we don't need the dollars from the food and beverage to sustain us. That's not what drives us. We set the dollars aside and tried to figure out what would be in the best interest of the folks coming to see us, our members, our visitors, our customers, and let that drive the model, and that will naturally and organically drive the financials and make those better. And so I really like the plan that we're moving forward with. It's going to be a limited menu. It's going to be a healthier menu. It's going to be more focused on local sourcing of products, farmers market type products, sandwiches, soups, salads, scoop and serve model is the way our consultant refers to it, but all freshly made every day, healthy. And honestly, that is a trend we've been seeing for a few years with what I refer to as the museum parents. They're not really looking for Snickers and cotton candy and those things anymore. They're looking for carrot sticks and bananas and healthy things. And I don't think we've done a really good job of adjusting to that and meeting that need. And so we will going forward. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think you always kind of serves as an amenity where you want that to be there as a support system to that, but you're not necessarily looking to that to be a cash cow or you're going to take on Minervas or do that type of thing.
No, that's not our intent. No.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Other counselors? Counselor Vacaris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Darren. I guess my idea for mini donuts is going to run into a buzzsaw with your approach to health, but anyhow.
There can be some exceptions to the rule.
I'll leave that for another day.
Yeah.
Where's the greatest opportunity for more revenue? Is it in philanthropy? Is it in rental? Is it in fees? Where do you see revenue growing outside of public support?
You know, the best answer I could give, I would say, is in the area of live theater and concerts. That one thing I'm really proud of is that has historically been the cash cow for our management company, for the Washington Pavilion of Arts and Science in particular. And the last several years, we've worked really hard to no longer try to balance on a one-legged stool, one-legged financial stool, but to get 2 and 3 and 4 legs underneath us. So we again remodeled every square foot in that science center, and the number of memberships, household memberships, has gone from a little over 2,000 just 5 or 6 years ago to more than 5,000 now, and that's a huge foundation of customer support. We know that members disproportionately buy more tickets to events. They spend more in the cafe. They spend more in the facility. So, you know, we talk a lot about diversity and being balanced financially. We've seen tremendous growth in the financials with the museums, with those investments and the corporate sponsorships in particular. But I think if I had to single out one area for revenue growth, I would say probably Broadway still, and philanthropy, individual philanthropy. So that announcement I mentioned a moment ago we'll be making next week, we think we might have one that's even bigger, not too far down the road. So we're really seeing some nice momentum with that. And I think it's because we didn't set out to go get the biggest gifts we could. We just went back to basics and fundamentals by having a great facility, great offerings, and people are recognizing that and coming forward and wanting to be a part of it. So I think that's been a good lesson for us as well.
Thank you.
Other counselors? I just have one quick question. It might be for you or Scott. When I look at the budget that was just presented, the Washington Pavilion current budget is for over $7 million. And only 6.6 has been spent. Would you like to address the building facilities and the things you've got going on down there?
I'm not exactly sure what that refers to. Maybe Scott or Sean is more familiar with that. Is that on the facility side?
That's correct. That's correct. Out of the entertainment tax. I know we appropriated some money for a parapet repair, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right. So explain again what side of the budget you're looking at. Are you looking at the repair and maintenance? Or are you looking at the capital improvements?
Capital improvements, it's on page 8 of what Director Pritchard presented.
Right?
Comes out of the entertainment tax, Event Center Complex, Orpheum, Washington Pavilion, 7.7 for a total of 10 million. And only 18% of that total budget has been spent.
Right. Well, a large part of that is going to be the parapet that's in there right now. And then, you know, there's other projects that are currently probably in design right now that have not been spent yet. So they will get bid either later on this year or early next year. So you'll start to see some of that money get spent down here in the next few months.
Where are we with the parapet?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So the material contract for the parapet is actually out on the street, and we'll have a pre-bid meeting next week for that. And then the bid for the installation of the fiberglass product will probably go out on the street next week, is when that bid will publish. And that one will open approximately 2 weeks after we open the bids for the materials. So it's coming along. It's slow, but again, we got to make sure that we get it right too. So I anticipate that we will start that project in the spring of 2023 with a completion date of around 8 to 9 months is what we're predicting.
Seems like we've been talking about that parapet for a long, long time. So.
Yeah, it has been a long time. It was a very sophisticated design. It was one that Arc Inc. didn't take lightly. It is one that they took a lot of time to design it for a lot of reasons, but they did a lot of homework in order to try and fit the budget to get the whole entire project to come together within the budget that we were constrained to.
Thank you. I look forward to that being completed. Thank you for your report. It's an exciting venue you have. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we move to the public comment section of our agenda. If anybody has a public comment on either one of the two subjects that we spoke about, please come forward.
Scott Arisman, Sioux Falls. Before I get to the pavilion, I was just looking at the executive session and item B, and I was checking the state laws. It kind of looks like you guys are going to be discussing tornado sirens or something similar. I'm not sure why that needs to be an executive session. That's not pending litigation. Don't know why that should be publicly discussed with you guys. It should be public meetings so the public can come and help discuss what they think about that. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not invited, but I reviewed the state law and it looks like tornado sirens. Anyway, as you can see, this is the most important page you should be looking at when you're deciding your budget, going through your budget hearings with the pavilion. This is their last annual report and financials. Now, you can find this online on their website. It's up there. A couple things that I found interesting was, in this report, they said that they have 4,234 memberships currently. 10 years ago, in 2012, they had 3,274, so 1,000 less. I'm not sure what they had for members when they first opened in 1999, but the population of Sioux Falls in 1999 was 124,000. In 2012, it was 154,000, and right now it's almost 200,000. So their memberships aren't really have gone up that much over 23 years, 22 years. What's interesting about this up here is that all the money from the feds, they laid off a lot of people, so I was kind of curious why they needed this money for, paycheck protection. It's almost $1 million. The two funds are about $1 million. What else is interesting too is if you look at this up here, is that, of course, there was COVID where they weren't open and they weren't doing shows, we get it. But you have, your 2.1 million from shows. That's where they get most of their revenue. I know Councilor McCurris was asking. And in 2019, they had 5.7 million. 2018, they had 8 million. 17, they had 3.7 million, and in 2016, they had 2.4 million. So it kind of sounds like the revenue is going down. Don't know why. They have a hall that's owned by the taxpayers. We take care of the maintenance on it. It's available, should be available all the time. They should do all kinds of shows. If you did not know, I worked there for the first 4 years it was open. I was a lead usher. Participated in almost every show. We had everything. That first and second year, rock shows, jazz, musicals are the big thing. That's where they make their money. That was a time period also where the art center was open for free for regional acts. Obviously with national stuff, you're gonna have to charge, like the guild show that's coming. But I wish they would go back to opening the art center up for free to everybody for regional work. It's something that they promised to us when they opened the facility, and they took it away from us. It's disappointing because I don't go there anymore. I don't know how much it was the last time. I think it was $15 to go look at a bunch of regional art. Not that there's anything wrong with regional art. I just think paying $15 to go see regional art when I can go see it for free at any of the galleries around downtown. They really need to. I don't think they make a lot of money from it. It's kind of a wash. It's kind of like the cafe. Regional stuff should be open. If it's a special exhibit, then you would charge. There's a lot of people that scratch their heads about that. There's a lot of people upset. Stop giving to the art center because of that. You really need to review that and have that open again for free. Also wonder how many people were laid off. Also wonder what the CEO makes. Nobody has had a report as to what the CEO is making for several years. Nobody knows. When Steve Hoffman, the first director, was running a place, he was very transparent. He was very open. We used to have lunch together quite a bit, and he would tell me, books are open, tell you what's going on. I think there's a couple of things you need to focus on when you're looking at their budget. They need to do more concerts. They need to bring in more revenue that way. That's the best way they're going to bring in revenue. They need to have the art center open for free. They need to get their memberships up. 10 years ago, they've only increased their memberships by 1,000 in 10 years. Kind of troubling a little bit to me, I guess. But those are just some things you guys can look at. You can find this online. You You can find several of the reports online. Thank you.
Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none? Counselor McCarris?
Mr. Chairman, I would motion to enter into executive session for consulting with legal counsel or reviewing communications from legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 125-23, and for discussing information listed in subdivisions 127.158 and 127.1517 pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 125-26.
We have a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sale,
Yes.
Starr, McCurris,
Yes.
Baranco,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
That motion passes. We'll move into executive session. Thank you very much for your attendance.